DevOps Talks conference, and now we have 3 attendees with us. Maybe you could introduce yourselves.
Hey, my name is Ollie. I'm the head of engineering at the Iconic.
All right.
I'm Pav. I run DevOps at finder.com.au.
My name's Alex. I'm a senior DevOps engineer at Answerada.
Excellent. So, Alex, how have you found the conference so far?
I've been really enjoying it, actually. Yeah, there's a lot of focus on people problems, which is the harder parts.
Right. Yeah. What about you? What's been your top takeaway from today or yesterday?
Sure. I really like the talk about Rancher, just to see how they pivoted. Last time I looked at it was like 2 years ago. They've changed it a lot, and it's now an interesting product.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how much technology changes, either when we look at it at an aggregate or at a specific product.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. And for you?
To be honest, I've loved the cultural side of things, and actually I've taken away pages of notes, which is actually a really good sign of a conference.
Yeah, and so what will you do with those notes when you get back to the office?
Hopefully restructure my teams a little bit.
Okay.
Rethink our ways of working, and maybe refocus some of the teams a little bit just on maybe, learnings.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Is this the first DevOps Talks conference that you all have been to?
DevOps Talks, yes.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey everybody. For those of you who were here yesterday, probably remember me. So I'm a senior program manager with the Azure CAT team, which is part of our engineering team. And we work with our customers on, I guess, the biggest, most complex projects that people are building on Azure. I guess our role is twofold. One is to help our customers be successful. So to understand their architectural requirements and make sure that they are building things in a performance, scalable and resilient way. And secondly, to gather feedback to improve our platform. So what I'm here to talk about today is hybrid data integration, specifically around our product, Azure Data Factory. So I've got a few slides and then we'll jump into some demos. And I know I'm here between you and morning tea, so I'll try and keep it fairly brief. So when we're looking at, I guess, the big trends that we're seeing with our customers at the moment, and I know I mentioned buzzword bingo yesterday, and I do have AI up there. I'm going to start on that side. So my background is data. So typically when I'm working with customers, it is on a data project. And AI or machine learning is something that a lot of our customers are looking at infusing into their landscape at the moment to either get improvements in process, management, etc., or improvements in customer outcomes and recommendations. And this all comes from machine learning and AI. In order to actually get the best for our customers, we need data. And most of our customers, we're finding, have either evolved to a certain point where they've got silos of data. They might be looking into cloud, so they've got some legacy programs on-prem as well as cloud data. A lot of customers are looking at using SaaS products as well. Or they might have evolved through things like product or company acquisitions. So typically we're working with people who have lots of legacy, lots of silos of data. And this is where cloud in the middle is starting to help people, because we have the capability to store vast amounts of data very, very cheaply and compute over them in a burstable, scalable manner. So like I mentioned, some of the value or some of the barriers to people getting value from their data is the silos. That's just a given, and I don't know of any organisation, even quite new ones, that don't have silos of data starting to form. As well as that, there's incongruent data types. So whether or not you've got like Oracle, you might have Teradata, you might have big data. So actually getting these various types of data together in a manner that you can reason across the whole suite of data is quite complex. Multi-cloud environments, typically we're working with customers, particularly in things like banking and finance. Through their APRA regulations, they do have to sit across multiple clouds typically. So in order to spread that out, they're creating new silos of data. And just the rising costs. So we're working with people who are looking at very large data warehouses on-prem and getting bills for $20 million for the next 5 years to uplift the product, the hardware, etc., without really getting any additional value from this money. So there's often a burning platform issue that customers come to us with of how can we actually get new value from our data and probably save at least four times what they'd spend if they were renewing that on-prem. So like I said, I'm here to talk about Azure Data Factory, which is our hybrid data integration platform, which being hybrid basically means that we can orchestrate data wherever it lives. So whether that is on your on-prem, it could be various different clouds, it could be SaaS products. We're able to orchestrate this data using the one product across the entire platform. So in the past, you might need to use something like Informatica on-prem. If you're using different clouds, there'd be other third-party products you might be using. There's typically not a product that you can use to orchestrate data across all of your data wherever it lives. Being a PaaS cloud service, it means it is basically pay per use. So you're not paying for hardware. There's not a licensing cost that you're kind of paying up front. It simply is deploy these pipelines and manage your data across your entire ecosystem. The tooling is quite easy and it's fully integrated with your various source controls. So we'll look at that a little bit later as well. So, and obviously, like I said, because it is PaaS, it's low total cost of ownership. So I guess the 4 kind of pillars that we're looking at here is the productivity. It's very quick and easy to use. The drag and drop UI, so that you don't need to learn any coding. It's all JSON in the back end, so you can go in and start manipulating the data as you need to. But there's a really simple UI that you can actually, particularly for data engineers, just begin creating pipelines and managing your data straight away. Like I mentioned, it is hybrid, and part of what we're going to talk about here is the security. So you can imagine when I say that I've got a PaaS product in the Azure cloud that can start to manage data on-prem, you'll probably start to think I'm a little bit crazy, but we'll look into how we can actually do that without you having to burn gaping big holes in firewalls. The other thing is obviously Microsoft, we do have a lot of customers using SSIS. So if you are an Azure customer, you might have noticed that we've actually got V2 of Data Factory that got released this year. Customers who've been using it previously, one of the big gaps or things that people really were asking for was the capability to bring SSIS packages into the cloud in a PaaS format. So the latest release of Data Factory have actually allowed you to lift and shift your SSIS and again, include them into your whole orchestration of your data. And as I mentioned, serverless, and obviously comes with all the certifications and guarantees that come from Microsoft. So when we look at a data pipeline or a data integration, I guess there's a few basic pillars of what we're doing here. We need to ingest data, typically need to store it somewhere so that we can actually reason over it. The prep and transform is where we start doing our big data, our machine learning, and we can bring whatever compute you need to use and whatever languages you need to use. We have the capability of using GPU machines if you're doing a lot of neural networks, etc. Or you can use very small or serverless compute to do your transformations. So there's a lot of options there. It's just like Lego, you just plug in whatever building blocks you need. And then the model and serve. And whether that's getting into your business reporting or if it's more like serving to a web front end, so you've got your customer recommendations getting fed back into a NoSQL database that's the back end for your web UI. There's lots of different ways that we can actually orchestrate this. Typically with customers, we're also seeing this is part of a Lambda architecture. So as well as having this, which is the batch or the slower moving portion of your Lambda architecture, there'd be a streaming layer on top. And that's where you notice down the bottom on the left, the IoT. So our IoT would typically have streaming coming through. We might have real-time machine learning on that stream, but then we might have batch jobs that do a complete relearn or a complete reprocess of our machine learning. And again, that's where we get into our batches, also the retraining of the models to continuously improve our machine learning. So I'll just go really quickly through a couple of common scenarios that we're seeing, just to show, I guess, the versatility of how this might fit in. So the first one's just your modern enterprise data warehouse. I guess there's a lot of, in the data space, there's a lot of, again, buzzwords, so people talking about data lakes, data virtualization, etc. I found in the last few months data virtualization in particular has become a really big topic with business users because there's the, I guess the perception that they can start to query the data without having to move it around. And as wonderful as that sounds, it can obviously have some severe impacts upstream. So typically what we're seeing customers do is start to look at data lakes. And again, anyone who's kind of looked at data lakes or been in the industry for a while, you'll start to hear terms like data swamp. And there'll be lots of jokes about, you know, what will happen to a data lake if you're not managing it and putting the governance around it. So we do need to have things like master data that tells us how we actually start joining all these different systems together. And we need to have catalogs so we know that where the data has been put and we can get it back and we're not storing 30 copies of it and just making a data hell for ourselves. So the other question we get now a lot is if I've got a data lake and I've got, whether it's Databricks or some other compute layer across the top, do I really need a data warehouse? And again, these are serving different purposes. The data warehouse is definitely more so for the business, the curated data that you're going to be reporting off of, where you need to do quick aggregations, etc. for, maybe it's a financial reporting system. So definitely the data warehouse is still very much a part of the data landscape that we're seeing at the moment. The next one, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is actually using the data pipeline and getting your machine learning and feeding those learnings back in as recommendations, which are near real time. So, classic examples of this kind of system would be, like I said, customer recommendations. So when you're looking at products on a website, using the machine learning to build the next best offer or what else you might be interested in. And again, like I said, the big ticket item for this release of Data Factory is the lift and shift of SSIS, but not just the ability to bring your packages to the cloud in a PaaS mechanism, but also to start integrating them with other parts of a data pipeline that you wouldn't have typically been orchestrating SSIS with on-prem. So being able to put it into a pipeline that's also doing big data and machine learning. And like I said, also just the connectivity with pretty much anything and everything. So we've got over 70 native connectors in the product already. So, this public cloud, so we do have S3, Redshift, etc. There's native Google connectors. There's native connectors for many, many SaaS applications, as well as kind of more typical on-prem sort of things like SAP, SaaS with the 1A, Hortonworks, etc. And beyond that, there's also generic like ODBC connectors so that we can kind of hook into data types that we haven't yet built native connectors for. So the integration runtime is, I guess, the key component to how this works and how we make it secure. So I'm working with customers for quite a long time on trying to integrate ADF. And quite frankly, 12 months ago, that was really hard. We had customers who were building a combination of PaaS and IaaS and wanting to use Data Factory to orchestrate them. You can imagine if I've got an IaaS, whether it's a Hadoop cluster or whatever, inside a VNet, I've got it secured, I've put a firewall around it. In order to orchestrate that with PaaS, how can I do that? I haven't got an IP address that I can burn through my firewall. So within ADF itself, we've got the concept of a data movement service or an integration runtime. So in the latest release, what we've done is actually giving you the option to self-host your integration runtime. So if you're using completely PaaS services, you can still use an Azure hosted runtime, which is part of the product, or you can choose to host your own. And that can either be on-prem or in a VNet in Azure. And so what this means is it's able to orchestrate your data flows without having to have a firewall modification. It's outbound only. And also this can then be hosted in another cloud. So for instance, I've been working with customers who are doing a migration from AWS to Azure. They've got firewalls around their S3, so we just put a runtime inside AWS and outbound, we're able to egress that to Azure without having to make any changes to their networking. Let's wait for that to build out. So, like I said, basically how this works is we have a server or a cluster of servers that sit inside a VNet, and it reaches outbound to the Data Factory service, which has the command and control. The other thing that's been upgraded in this release is the storage of credentials. So there's the option of storage or service encrypted credentials, which is standard. If you're running it on-prem, you can use an on-prem encryption credential storage, or you can also utilize Azure Key Vault. Like I said, it's also clustered, so we've got HA as well as scalability built in. So this is just showing what I was talking about earlier around the VNet. So for instance, if I've got on-prem data that I need to move into the cloud, I can put my runtime on-prem. There's no necessity to allow any inbound cloud traffic. It's all outbound. It reaches out to the scheduling or the orchestration component, finds out what jobs it needs to run when, and it orchestrates it all from on-prem. Alternatively, if customers have used something like an express route, or if you're an AWS person, I think it's called Direct Connect, but to basically give yourself a permanent high-speed connection to cloud, then you can set up an extension of your on-prem address range. And that way you can actually orchestrate from a server in Azure, but in your private address space. So like I said, I've mentioned that the version of ADF that we've got now was released earlier this year, and it was a significant uplift from what we had previously. I've also mentioned that our team is there to get customer feedback. So this is a really good example of how our team operates with the customers and the community to understand what they need and actually feed that back into the product team. So when ADF first got created, it was a linear time slice, so it was more of a data pipeline. And for customers using traditional ETL, it didn't have a lot of the capabilities that were required, such as conditional branching, looping, dependencies, and the developer experience was pretty poor. Like if you didn't know JSON, you just couldn't use it. So all this feedback gets encapsulated, goes back to the product team, and that's how we continue to improve the platform. So what I'm going to do now is just jump out of this and actually go to the portal and have a look at it. So is anyone using Azure? Oh, good, there's at least 4 hands. So this is the Azure portal. Everything that you do here is fully scriptable, templatable, obviously integrated with whatever your source control is, whether you're using VSTS or Git. So, I mean, for me personally, it's really easy to come in and start building stuff in here using the GUI and then exporting the templates I've created, parameterize them, keep them in Git, and then it's really easy to recreate everything that I've done. So what I'll do is I'll just pop into this one quite quickly. This is one that I've just created this morning. So when we create a data factory, it's almost like an empty building. So I've just created a factory, it's called Dataflow Demo. I tell it what subscription I want to use, what location I want to build it in. And actually, speaking of locations, that's probably something I should talk about. So when we look at our cloud services, most things are regional deployments. So there's some things like Active Directory, which are global. You don't necessarily have your data in a specific location. For most data services, we've got things about data sovereignty. So we do typically have a location that we choose. Data Factory is a little bit of an anomaly in that we've only got it in about 6 regions. However, the data movement exists in every region. So when I go to create a data factory, you'll notice this one's in Southeast Asia. My integration runtime that does all the movement is actually situated in Australia or wherever my data components are. So again, I've got customers who are in APRA-regulated organisations who are able to use Data Factory because although it says it's deployed to Southeast Asia, that's literally just the metadata about the jobs. I'll pop into the author and monitor. So the first thing when you get a new Data Factory, there'll be a little welcome page that'll pop up. And as soon as it does, sorry, we're pairing off my phone, so it's not super fast. Actually, I might have another one open over here. No, I want the new one. Okay, it should give me the option to connect it to a Git or VSTS repo. Because that's so slow, I'll just go to, here's one I prepared earlier. So this is another demonstration one that I've built earlier. I'm using GitHub, I've connected to my account and given a collaboration branch, etc. And if we look at my pipelines, you notice I've got 2 copy pipelines here. I'll just jump out and in my repo, you'll see the 2 pipelines that I've created. And then all of the activities and the data sets that are related to it will be stored here. So sorry, this is the new one. So when you first go in, you get this option to set up your code repository. So the options at the moment are Git and VSTS Git, but presumably that will increase in the future depending on customer demand. So this is a really simple pipeline. And so when we're talking about ETL, if you've been using any other product, the pipeline concept will be quite simple. Typically, we have, I guess, a unit which is a source, an activity, and a destination, or an input, activity, output. So in this one, my source is blob storage, my sink is data warehouse, and I can also put in some prep scripts as part of this. So for instance, if I want to be able to repeat this one quite frequently, I can put pre-scripts to truncate tables or to rebuild new tables. Another thing that has been added in this release is the addition of Polybase, which is a really fast way to upload data into our data warehouse. So if you've been using things like BCP, that's single-threaded. When we're talking about pushing data into the data warehouse, it's an MPP system. So by using Polybase, we can get that full parallelism that allows really fast data uploads. Other capabilities, like I mentioned, is around the branching or the conditional capabilities. So if I can click in the right place, I can start putting logic around what to do at the end of each step, on success, on failure. I can start looping and branching as I want to. And I can build up really complex pipelines. Like I mentioned, everything is fully programmable through code, and so you can also go in and inspect. It's all just JSON, and again, it's much easier to do it through the GUI first, and then actually go into the code a bit later once you've got the templates built out for you. Now, I also wanted to just show you in this one. So this is a new preview that we've started working on, which is actually data flow. So as well as being able to define my pipelines and data sets, we're now starting to define data flows, which actually allow data engineers to start putting, I guess, more data business logic without having to even understand Spark. So in this data flow, it'll be utilising a Databricks cluster in the back end to run Spark scripts. I don't need to write any Scala or Python. I can literally come in and start adding in aggregations, joins, etc. through a drag and drop GUI. So the user experience is kind of improving continuously. And again, like I said, with the data visualization, data virtualization, where people are looking at really abstracting themselves from the source systems, this kind of capability is getting very close because they don't need to learn new languages in order to join the data together. So I'll just pop up one more slide with the go-dos, and this is how you can actually get in and start using Data Factory. Now, as I promised, I typically get through this stuff really quickly, particularly when morning tea is straight after me. So I've probably got a bit of time for a few questions, if anyone has any. Otherwise, go get coffee. Yes?
So does Microsoft have like a deep learning initiative and like TensorFlow or something like that?
Yeah. So we have CNTK, and I guess, again, there's many different ways to consume it. So we've got a partnership with Databricks. So we offer Azure Databricks in most regions. It's in Australia. And we do offer machine learning or different machine learning libraries pre-built. So you can go and choose a cluster that's optimized for various different learning techniques, and you can deploy to GPU machines as well.